Good afternoon. We're here at the Morse Institute Library. It is July 29th, 1998, Natick, Massachusetts. We have the privilege of interviewing Joseph A. Poshefko, who is one of the 40-plus living flying tigers. Welcome, Mr. Poshefko.
Thank you very kindly.
And you're living there with your
My
wife?
And we've been there 50 years.
50 years. And what is your wife's name?
Mary.
And may I ask you how old you are?
I will be 83 next month.
And you have children?
I have two children, Joanne, who's in Tallahassee, Florida, and Robert, who was in Hopkinton, Massachusetts.
And I understand you have one grandson?
One grandson, Michael, and he's a Navy SEAL. He's down in Panama City, diving school now for SEALs.
And he
has a great-grandson, Kalen.
Well, congratulations. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
Where were you born?
I was born in Emmaus, Pennsylvania.
How do you spell that?
E-M-M-A-U-S.
And were you raised in Emmaus?
I was raised in Nesquehoning, Pennsylvania. This is a tough one. Nesquehoning. That's an Indian name.
And growing up at that time, you went on to school.
I went to high school there and graduated from high school.
What was your family background?
Family background, my dad came from Europe, Slovakia. My mother came from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
How did they meet?
They met in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, through relatives.
And they had how many children?
10 children.
You were one of 10.
I'm one of second oldest of 10, yeah.
When and where did you enter the military?
I entered the military in 1937 in Langley Field, Virginia, the Army Air Corps at that time.
What branch? Army Air Corps?
Air Corps, Army Air Corps.
Did you choose that?
Well, I first took a physical exam for the Navy, but I had to wait 3 months, so I wanted to get the service quickly, and they said there was an opening in the Air Force upstairs in Philadelphia, and I went upstairs and took a physical and left for Langley Field the next day.
Why did you want to go in?
Well, I applied for state trooper in Pennsylvania and thought I was going to be called for training, and they omitted my name, and I found out that I belonged to the wrong party. So
the wrong party?
Democratic or Republican.
Okay.
So the next day I went and joined the service.
Did you have friends that joined with you?
Not a friend, no.
Did family members join the service?
George was stationed at Hawaii then. He was in the 27th Infantry.
That was your brother?
Brother George, yeah.
Where did you have your basic training?
I had my basic training in Langley Field,
At
Virginia.
Langley. And what was that like?
Well, it was simple marching and drilling, and I was a little bit used to the Army life because I came out of the CCCs.
Now, what is that?
Civilian Conservation Corps. And we knew how to make up our beds, we knew how to salute the flag, and we knew how to march.
How long were you in basic training?
Basic training was 3 months.
Were you able to develop friendships during that period of time?
A lot of friendship, yeah.
Did you stay in contact with them after you left basic?
Yes, I am still in contact with the fellows, many of them.
You are?
Yes, I am.
This is wonderful. What was your specialty during that period of time?
Specialty was armor, chief armor.
And will you explain that a little?
Well, the chief armor, he has responsibility of the weapons on the airplane, the training of the pilot, and make sure that they're in working order because a pilot is useless unless he knows how to shoot.
Sure. So would you have to load the weapons?
We have to load the weapons. We'd have to care for them. We'd have to check them out. We'd have to electrically and mechanically.
And then you were up in the plane with
No, we
the
were
crew?
down on the ground and everything.
Mm-hmm.
We were on the field close by all the time. In other words, we took the beating from the bombers and the fighters. The strafing and the bombing was against our field, you know, and that's where the Japs hit all the time.
What was your first duty station?
Was Toungoo, Burma. Toungoo. And this was an old airfield that the British gave up to us for training purposes. And we had 99 P-40s that were obsolete that the British did not want. And that's how we got a hold of the P-40s.
How old were you at this time?
At that time, I was 22,
Single?
single.
When you were over there, did your duties change at any particular time during that period?
Our duties did not change because we were hired to go over there for our specialty. This was a highly efficient group of trained personnel in civilian status.
What was this group called?
It was called American Volunteer Group.
The American Volunteer Group.
Mm-hmm.
And did they get a nickname further on during the war?
Flying Tigers.
The Flying Tigers.
was named after
So you were a member of the Flying
the Flying
Tigers.
Tigers, and they painted that shark's nose on a P-40s, and the Chinese, they liked that P-40. That was their. They always thought that the shark was something the Japanese were afraid of.
So the Chinese gave you the nickname?
The Chinese, I don't know if the Chinese, but somebody gave us the nickname anyway.
Now, you were an elite group. Prior to becoming this elite group, what were you doing with the branch of service? You were in the Army Air Corps first.
Army Air Corps.
So carry us up to the time that you came to Burma. How did that all occur?
Well, I was in Groton, Connecticut. We were on maneuvers, and we were putting our pilots through gunnery. That's aerial and ground targets. And Phil Cochran at that time, who was Flip Corcoran, you read him in Terry and the Pilots, was my squadron commander there. And he said, "Joe, there's a fella here from Washington looking for fellas to go to China." And the fellow that interviewed us was Skip Adair, and he was the number 2 man under Chenault.
And Chenault was the founder of the Flying
He
Tigers.
was the yeah.
And it's my understanding his name was Claire
Lee
Chenault.
Chenault.
And a little background on him?
Well, he was an Army captain in the Air Force, and they discharged him because on account of his hearing, and he was also an activist for air power. Mm-hmm. And he was fighter pilot specialist. And the Army Air Force did not like his tactics.
Mm-hmm. So what persuaded you personally to join this elite group?
Oh, I would say first it was adventure. Mm-hmm. And thinking of going to China was something else at that time.
And how did you get there?
We sailed on a Dutch freighter, 10,000-ton Dutch freighter called the Jagersfontein. And this night out of Pearl Harbor, our ship came to a standstill or a lane there, and we looked outside, and the Salt Lake City was on one side of us, and the Northampton was on the other.
Those were
two heavy cruisers.
Okay.
And these 2 heavy cruisers escorted us from Honolulu to Singapore, almost 30 days and 30 nights, except for a short distance to Batavia. The Dutch cruisers took us into Singapore.
So you were civilians.
Civilians
Who were
guarded by the U.S. Navy before the war.
So it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that in becoming a civilian working with this elite group, you had been discharged from?
Discharged honorably from the Air Force.
And then you signed a contract?
And we signed a contract for a year with Camco's.
And
Central
Camco,
Aircraft Manufacturing Company.
which was the name of the group that you were actually working for.
That's right, that was the group we ran.
And was this with the blessing of the president?
This was with the blessings of President Roosevelt.
Because the United States had not officially gotten into the war yet?
True, true.
Okay. So tell us about this experience. You get over to Burma.
We get over to Burma, and they brought us up to this place, Tungu, and there we looked, and there are thatched huts. They're bamboo thatched huts. They're 6 foot off the ground, and there's no windows or doors such to prevent the bugs from coming in on you. The natives don't know how to cook for you. I got natives to cook for you. And we got a sleeping bed there. It's made out of wood, and the ropes are your springs. It's all ropes, and then you have a straw mattress and a straw pillow. Now this was your sleeping quarters, and you had a mosquito netting.
How many were over there with you?
There was, altogether, when we started, was 254. There was 3 squadrons.
And what squadron were you?
I was in the 3rd squadron.
And what was that nickname?
That was Hell's Angels.
The Hells Angels Squadron.
Yeah, we had Adam and Eve, and we had the pandas, and the 3rd squadron was Hell's Angels.
Out of that 240 plus, did they all stay?
Well, we had a lot of discharges, a lot of quits. A lot of people quit.
Because of the difficulties?
Well, they didn't like the conditions, they didn't like what they saw, and they weren't up to it. They just wanted to get back to Uncle Sam.
Now, once you were there, did you have to go through a different type of training with General
The training
Chennault?
there was strictly, each one had their specific job to do, and we lived under orders, because you couldn't be drunk, or you couldn't do this, or drugs. We never had a drug problem, I gotta say that. In the heaviest drug place in the world, we never had one single man on drugs. And that's hard to believe, but we never had a drug problem the whole period I was over there.
Which was how long?
Over a year. And we were in China, where opium was one way of life. In Burma, they had the betel nut, which was another drug, and they also had the heaviest crop of poppy seed that made heroin and name it, the heaviest drugs in the world are grown in that area.
Were you aware of these drugs prior to getting over there?
No, we were not aware of these drugs, absolutely not. No. And there was a lot of dysentery. There was many of various elephantitis. There was, I've seen thyroids up there like that. I've seen, lack of iodine in areas. I've seen most pitiful sights in China. No doctors, kids with broken bones protruding to their, nobody taking care of them.
So the
blind people, say a dozen blind people sitting along the road, one trying to help the other.
What was that like for a young boy from Pennsylvania?
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. If you tell somebody today, they don't believe you anyway. So, but it was a sight to behold.
Now, when you went over with this group, did you have medical care on the barracks?
We had a doctor with us, Dr. Richards. He was our medical doctor on the front at all times in the field. We had a surgeon, Dr. Gentry. We had a bone man, we call him, another doctor that took care of our bones. And we had 2 nurses who took care of our...
And were you under Chennault's leadership?
Directly under Chennault, yeah.
What was he like?
He was an honest man. We had a lot of confidence in him. And what he said, he lived up to. And we all loved him.
And you had training with him that lasted how long?
We had training with him Well, we started in, say, July, and when the war broke out, we were still training in December. We were still training because we had all kinds of flights there and operations and tactics, and we were also knew that the Japanese were interested in a lot of fields nearby. We photographed them. We knew a lot of the fields that would be probably used if they came down that way.
And would you just repeat July of what year again?
July of 41.
So you were an armor.
Chief Armor.
Chief Armor. So tell us about a typical day for you.
A typical day would be, we had, say, 25 airplanes. Typical day out there would be pilots get ready and they'll fly, and they'll go up, we'll tell them, try the guns out, try to shoot, and just like in combat, you know, try anything you can, and then they'd come back and see if they had any jams or we had problems. And we had guns, 2 guns that fire through the propeller. You know,
In the front.
In the front, and they had to be perfectly synchronized so they didn't hit the propeller.
So this was your job to make sure that...
Make sure that all of that mechanism was.
And again, these were used, old, obsolete airplanes.
The airplanes were obsolete in a way as far as the British thought anyway for combat.
And yet
they thought
you...
they were too slow, and they had a lot of, they wanted to get later models.
So you kept these airplanes in A1 condition.
We kept these airplanes in A1 condition.
And then the pilots went up with how many crewmen usually?
Well, the pilot was by himself. He was a fighter pilot, see.
So it was only one man on a P40.
One man on a P40.
And it's my understanding, and if you could enhance this at all, they had quite a record of
yeah, their record was 299 confirmed victories. In my squadron, we lost 4 pilots for the whole duration. And most of these pilots were killed strafing, which the P-40 was not a strafing airplane. General Stilwell wanted us to use the P-40 to help him along his route because he was in trouble all the time.
And that was in Burma also?
In Burma, yeah. General Stilwell did not know anything about Air Force or Air Force airplanes or how to use them anyway. He was an infantryman from World War I, and he wanted to fight in the trenches. And he did not get along with General Chennault in no way.
Did that make it difficult for all of you?
That made it very difficult because he was, when General Chennault became a general, we were civilians, and Stilwell was his boss, and he could give direct orders to Stilwell, and Stilwell would have to give direct orders to us, and we were civilians. So that didn't go too good.
Sure.
No.
When you started with some of these successful missions, did the press...
The press gave us a good coverage. In fact, we had a lot of people from the States come over there, as you know, in Time and Magazine and Look Magazine. And we had a lot of British writers there too, and photographers.
What was that like for you?
Well, we asked them, give us more airplanes. We didn't ask them for any coverage. We wanted airplanes as well. Parts or airplanes, and we could not get them. Uncle Sam left us blind. He didn't help us at all.
Did the Chinese help?
The Chinese had nothing to help us with. The only thing is we had to get gasoline, and gasoline had to be flown over the hump.
And explain the hump.
The hump was the Himalaya Mountains from India to Burma, and that was a long haul to get gasoline. And then you didn't know what kind of gasoline you were getting, and the containers that were, and you had to use your airplanes and take that chance.
So you had a big responsibility that these planes would...
Big responsibility of keeping these airplanes in top-notch condition.
How many other armors did you work with?
Each squadron had 5. Each 5.
So when you saw that plane returning, Was there celebration, or was there no
Usually-
time?
Usually a lot of times these pilots would come over and do a slow roll or for victories, and it was very dangerous because this was a heavy airplane doing a slow roll, come over the field. Well, the instant they hit the ground, you jumped on that airplane and you got going like a man out of the moon.
To ready it for the next...
Ready for it immediately, because you didn't know, you only had minutes before that they could come over and strafe you.
So was it exhausting work for you?
It was tiresome, it was dangerous, and it was part of our life. That was the way we took it.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't complain. There was no complaints.
There was, from things that I've been reading, there's this sense that it was sort of a swashbuckling unit of...
It was a close-knit group, even today. It was a close-knit group, and they worked together. This is the main thing of it.
You had to work together.
You had to work together, and there was no sergeants or majors, or there was no officers in charge, and there was no guy in charge. It was strictly each man on his own.
So you were equals.
Equal. Everyone was equal. Yeah.
And each one had a job
Each one had a job, and that was his specific job while he was there.
as important as the others.
Right. Each one.
Did you hear about or see any other units in the area? I know you mentioned General
General Stilwell.
Stilwell.
Well, Stilwell had the Chinese Army down there, and he also had a few American officers with him.
What did the American officers think about you in your
American
group?
officers, we didn't have too much contact with them as such, because we didn't have troops protecting us, as an army, come over and protect you on the field. We had some native in Burma. We had, or the British, I never did see any large group of British officers or men in all my time down there. It was natives there, Cajuns or whatever they call them, the Burmese small guys, and very efficient and good fighters. But as I see Chinese armies go for days and march, going to war, but in actual combat, I never did see them in actual combat, because it would take 10 Chinese and one would have a rifle. The rest would be carrying food and wood and to keep going, but they didn't have the equipment. They didn't have no modern equipment. They didn't have no tanks or modernized, mechanized groups or anything like that. Everything they did, they carried by hand. And the shoes on them was like old rubber tires, sandals put on there. And then they had these warm, and the clothing was on there was like cotton with blue, and they were full of cooties. When they open up, they're full of cooties all the time because they had no place to wash. So they had a hard life, a real hard life,
Now you were in an area, and it was, as you mentioned earlier, bug infested, hot.
Hot. We had scorpions there. We in Burma, where we had the king cobra. We had named the type of bugs. We had them all mites, leeches, especially the leeches, the most dangerous thing out there. They hang on to the leaves and they catch onto your and suck your blood like you'd never believe. A lot of our soldiers died that were in the jungle, that the ones that fought in the ground, And not only that, back in there was a lot of crocodiles too.
Really?
There were a lot of crocodiles back in there.
Now you mentioned that you still stay in touch with a number of...
I stay in touch with quite a few members of my old squadron back in the 30s.
Can you name some of them?
Sure. Charlie Filer.
And where is Charlie?
Charlie Filer's in Ohio. Emo Mistrick, he's in Rhode Island. Cove, he's in Pennsylvania. And Sullivan, he's over here in Lexington. So they're the ones way back.
And you also mentioned prior to going on camera about a gentleman named Charles Older.
Charles Older, yeah.
Now, was he in your squadron?
He was in my squadron. He was a pilot in my squadron. He later became the Superior Court judge in the Manson case. He's still living today.
He is. And where is he living?
He's living in Los Angeles.
And you also mentioned a gentleman, Gerhard Newman.
Gerhard Newman lived in Swampscott, and he passed away a few months ago. He developed the jet engine for General Electric. He was vice president in charge of a jet engine division.
And he was part of your
He
squadron?
was part of our group, yeah.
Tell us also, while you were there, you had mentioned about other family members serving in the military.
Well, I had a brother, George, who served in the 27th Infantry, later the 25th Division. He was at Pearl Harbor and survived, and then went to Guadalcanal, and he was killed in Guadalcanal and was awarded Distinguished Service Cross. John, my younger brother, was on a B-17 on his 37th mission. He got shot down over Germany and is buried in the Patton Cemetery in Luxembourg. Bill, my other brother, he was served in the artillery, and he served 3 years overseas. He went from there all the way, he ended up in Auschwitz. And then they drafted my youngest brother. I think it was a Korean War, and they wanted to put him in the paratroopers, but Mom finally got him out of the paratroopers.
Now, your brother who was in Auschwitz, was he there as a
He was
prisoner of war?
No, he went there to visit. That was where he ended up at, Auschwitz, when they came through. Yeah, that was their last stop. Yeah.
Once you were finishing up your time in Burma,
Yeah.
were you able to hear about the war and what was going on?
We got radio reports. There was radio reports, just like Pearl Harbor. I was standing on the wing of the P-40 on December the 7th, and a man from the Radio Shack ran out and said Pearl Harbor was just bombed. So immediately we scattered all of our airplanes on the field there, and we had alerts every day, morning and noon and night, in case the Japanese came over, because we had no really alert system at that time.
And did they come over?
They didn't come over there until we went to Toungoo, down to Mingledon Airport in Rangoon. They came in there on December the 23rd.
And December the 23rd, was that Christmas Day you mentioned?
Christmas, that was 2 days before Christmas, and I was down in Rangoon, Burma that day buying a pair of shoes, and I looked up and looked at a distance. I see all these airplanes coming up, and I figured, oh, this got to be Japanese. And so there was a lot of natives there, so I got them into this building and got them under the stairways. And when they dropped their bombs, they dropped them right down the street I was on. And when I came out there, all these people were chopped up. Oh, it was just a mess. Water mains and bodies and people screaming. And they killed hundreds of people right in that one area that we were in.
So was that your first real look?
That was my first christening of fire from the Japanese. So what I did then, I went in there to the store and I said to the fellow, you got to take us out to the field. So some way we got around. I got on a running board and he got us to the field, and the two sentries at the main entrance, they were killed by a bomb, and the field was shattered with bombs and everything else, and that was the christening I got the first day.
And what about any of your planes?
That first day we lost 2 pilots, and we never lost another pilot in combat after that. And that was, the first one was a lucky shot from a tail gunner. Got the one guy, and after that, our only losses were from strafing in the squadron, strafing missions, but that's complete as far as our squadron goes.
And how long were you in Rangoon?
We were in Rangoon for about 2-3 months.
And still as a civilian group?
Still as a civilian group, yeah.
After Rangoon, what happened?
After Rangoon, we went to Kunming for a rest.
And where is Kunming?
China.
In China.
China. And then after we got our planes cleaned up and set up again, we came back to Magui, Burma. And from Magui, we went to Mungsi, then we went to Lasho, then we went to Lungling.
And how
then
did you travel?
By truck or by jeep. We flew down from Kunming to Magui, and that was almost the last of our squadron too. We took off there. 17 of us were in the airplane. There was an Army pilot came in there, took over the C-47, I think it was, and the engine was kicking out. We told him to abort the hop, but he didn't. When we get down to the end of the runaway, we run into the trees and knock limbs down. We never got in the flight position and just circled around and we landed. And we told General Chennault, send that fella right back to the States. It was God was above us watching us. We should have never made it. We only had 2 parachutes in the airplane.
Tell us if you remember any special moment with General Chennault that might stick in your mind.
General Chennault, he was hard of hearing, but when he spoke, I have to tell you this, the Chinese came and said, well, what we'll do, we'll come out to operations when you come up here to Kunming, and we will have cookies for you and something to drink. Then all you have to do is sign this chit. So when payday comes, we'll charge you with the chits. So when payday came, Chennault got all the chits. So he called everybody together. And he said, now fellas, I got the chits here now. Here it is. It's Clark Gable. It's all the movie stars there are. Now he says, you know, Clark Gable isn't in here. He said, you know all these other ones. And he said some of them were cuss words too, you know.
Oh, the way someone had
Yeah.
signed off on the
And
chit.
everybody laughed. I mean, this was really funny, you know. And he even smiled too. So he didn't hold us to the few dollars for that. See, we had to pay $1 a day for our bill over there to the Chinese. It cost $1 a day.
Now, as civilians, who paid your salaries?
As civilians, the salary came through Camco. Camco, we had the contract with them.
And was it a good salary?
It was a good salary
Compared
in them
to the-
days compared to others. And it came part of Lend-Lease, I think, and all. I think it was part of Lend-Lease to China. But it was all under contract from Camco.
Now, it was my understanding that when you signed on to Camco, it was with a guarantee that you could then pick up where you left off
Picked
if
off
you
or-
were in the service?
In the service, yeah. We could come back and pick up with the same rating or join the Air Force, wherever you wanted to.
What was your rating when you went in?
I was a staff sergeant when I went in.
And did you decide to go back in, or?
When I came back to the States, there was a fellow named over there, General Bissell, and he ranked Chennault by one day, and he treated us unmanly, like I would say. He said, if you don't sign up here now, he said, I'll get you when you get back to the States, and I'll put you in infantry. So that upset most of our people. So many of our fellows probably would have stayed there, but they came back to the States and took their chances here.
Now, when you came back, what did you do?
When I came back, I went with Eastern Aircraft at that time and was in General Motors building the Navy Wildcat. So 12 of us came back and we took over the flight line down there. Gunverdal was our chief test pilot who later got killed. He came out of my squadron. So we had 4 pilots and 8 ground crew took care of the flight line for Eastern Aircraft.
And where was that?
In Linden, New Jersey.
In New Jersey.
And they were lucky. They had all this top-notch superior guys to take over a flight line for a new product. So we turned out a beautiful airplane.
Did you take any time off between the time you arrived home and
I think
working with?
I had about a month off there at that time, you know. And I got to say, one of our fellows that went over to Europe, General Howard, he was the only fighter pilot in the European theater of operation that received the Congressional Medal of Honor. Jim Howard.
Why was he the only one?
He was escorting B-17s, and he came down on these B-17s where they were being attacked by about 30 German fighters, and he took them on and shot down 4 or 6 of them, and the fellows on the B-17s put him in for the Congressional Medal of Honor. He died here 2 years ago in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Do you feel that perhaps the gentleman who was the gentleman that was a day senior to Chenault,
yeah,
treated you this way because of possibly a jealousy over the...
He was a hardcore, and he didn't like Chenault in the first place. He did not like Chenault. And he was of the old class, I think, with Arnold, General Arnold, who was the chief of the Air Force at that time. And Chenault did not fit in there with that group.
So did you feel then when you came home that it was a worthwhile experience?
Oh, I think it was a worthwhile experience. It was more than I bargained for. And I think it was one of the greatest things of adventure that any man could have had. And we were young.
And that probably had a lot to do with it?
That had a lot to do with it, yeah.
But do you feel that you didn't get the recognition that you should have received?
We weren't looking for recognition. No, recognition was not our place. I think what we needed was airplanes. That's what we wanted. We could have had bombers. It could have been a different story over there. We could have get the Japs busier than they ever were, you know. It would have chased them from going down further south. They'd have been handicapped and stayed up there in Burma and China. But we had no bombers. Yeah. And the British had obsolete Blenheim bombers, which didn't hold up at all against the Zero fighter or any fighter.
And the Zero fighter was the Japanese plane?
The Japanese plane, yeah. The British lost a flight of Hurricanes and Spitfires. They got lost one night, I think 30-some coming from India, so that almost wiped out their Air Force coming over to help them. They never had a Spitfire while I was there in Burma, never. They had Hurricanes and Brewsters that were obsolete from the United States and Blenheims, but they didn't have no first-line airplanes over there either.
Since you come home and you've started with this organization, I'm sorry, what was the name of the group again? That
AVG?
That you worked with?
Oh, Camco AVG?
No, when you came home to New Jersey.
Eastern Aircraft.
Eastern Aircraft, I'm sorry. And how long did you work with Eastern Aircraft?
I worked with Eastern Aircraft in 1945. And then I went in the automobiles with them. And I came up here from Linden to Framingham when they opened the plant here.
At the General Motors plant?
General Motors plant.
And is that
I was safety director over there before I retired.
And is this when you settled in Natick?
That's when I settled in Natick. 1948.
And did you come
June.
to Natick married, or did you get married when you...
Oh, I was married after I came back.
When you came back. What was it like for your family when you came back, having experienced, as you said, an adventure of a lifetime?
Oh, my family was a close-knit family. And I think everybody took things in stride. We know it wasn't easy, but we were a happy-go-lucky family.
What was it like for your mother, having this wonderful, close-knit family and losing 2 sons to war?
Oh, I think it took a lot of my mother, yeah, and my father, too. Yeah, they suffered, no getting away from it.
Right.
Yeah.
How important was not only serving in the military, but also doing this special service for freedom?
Well, I think that freedom is something that we shouldn't take lightly. If I'm looking back now, if the Japanese or the Germans won any part of the war, we would be talking Japanese today, or we would be under the German Nazis. There was no getting away from it, because if they had even the A-bomb, they would have taken any part of this Uncle Sam's territory they wanted. We had no alternative. And after Pearl Harbor, our Navy was destroyed, to say the least. And you take what we had in this, when I was in the service in 1937, we only had 3 fighter groups in the whole United States. Could you imagine that? 3 fighter groups in a big country like ours. And we had 12 B-17s in Langley Field, Virginia, and that's all there was in the whole United States. We had them all in Langley Field. So we were not equipped for war in 1937, 38, 39, we started to build up a little bit. But this country was on its knees too. We didn't fly many days. We didn't have gasoline in Langley to fly all day. We had to go half days down there and flying and training.
Was that very frustrating for your group?
It was very frustrating because the money, and we were serving, you know, we got $21 a month. And we were taking care of those airplanes for $21 a month. Could you imagine that? Mm. And out of that $21, you had to take care of your laundry, your insurance, and all your toiletries. It was unbelievable. I think the subsistence in them days, I think they allowed you 60 cents a day for your meals, actually, in the Army, you know, the breakfast, summer, that's all it was. Mm-hmm. This country was suffering the Depression.
What did you think then, and what do you think now regarding the war effort?
The war effort, I believe in having a strong country, strong military. That's all these people will look up to. If you're strong, if you're weak, they will have no use for you. Be strong forever. Don't give up.
And by that you mean continue with a
Air
military
Force,
presence?
Navy, and whatever we have for protection. Have the best at all times.
One of the other questions that we've asked a number of our interviewees is how you personally feel about the difference of public opinion regarding the veterans who served during World War II, during the Korean conflict, and during the Vietnam War.
I think this country has let down the veterans. I really do. Now, I never got anything from the veterans, not one thing. In fact, I never got a bonus from Pennsylvania yet. And my family, for the both boys that were killed, my mother lost 5 years of compensation. She never got it retroactive either. So I feel that the veterans, even the hospitals today, they're closing them up, they forgot the veteran. That's a joke. Mm. The veteran let's not talk about him. I mean, that's days gone by, lives gone by. Yeah, I don't have any real thoughts of people thinking that we are something to be remembered, really.
You think they've dropped the ball on that?
I think they dropped the ball. And when I look at Pearl Harbor, I looked at my brother's grave down there, a picture of it sent up, and his grave had flowers on it, but there was hundreds around. There wasn't one flower, I mean, and they never had the memorials down there. They forgot the memorials down there too now.
Tell us about what's happening in October.
In October, we're going down to Midland, Texas, and we're going to be inducted into the Confederate Air Force Hall of Fame.
And this is the Flying Tigers.
The Flying Tigers, and the first group down there that had been inducted was Doolittle's Raiders, so we'll be the second.
Just the second group.
And then one of the pilots that will also be inducted there will be Bennett. He was the one that shot down Yamamoto with that when he was going to the island, did the end of Yamamoto.
So you're going to make that trip?
So we're going to make that trip, hopefully.
And how many are living currently?
We figure 41. I think I have 41 on the list.
Out of the over
254, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you like to leave us with any thoughts or memories that you'd like to share, not only with your family, but with the community or with people in the future who may be watching this fascinating tape?
Oh, I think that America is the greatest country in the world. There is no country close to us, no way. We have such freedoms such water, such food, such landscapes, such beauty in our country that we're living in utopia in the United States, no doubt about it. And we have somebody looking after us right now. We can't let this go down the drain.
Mr. Poshefko, I would like to personally thank you and thank you for our community. This has been such a rewarding afternoon.
I thank you kindly. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Especially to think that we're all leaving you soon.
Well,
And I think that the youngsters should learn more history about our country and World War II and Korea and Vietnam and all the rest of these conflicts, because it took a lot of blood, a lot of sadness, and a lot of people grieving for the rest of their lives. It ruined a lot of lives and families.
you're absolutely right.
Yes, it did.
Well, thank you again.
You're welcome.